Okay, welcome back, and this time Chapter 6, Project Activity and Risk Planning. Whenever I say activity, you should always think schedule. Schedule and risk planning. Of course, that's going to incorporate some cost management as well, and resourcing. As we've discussed, those four are related. Though if I refer to the triple constraint, I solely mean schedule, cost, and scope. So, we've done the initial project coordination, early meetings. We've determined at a high level, right? What is the scope we're trying to get at? At a high level, what are these areas of responsibilities? We've even identified at a high level stakeholders and determined high level budgets, which will change as we do detailed planning, and a risk management group up front. We've also met with, interviewed, and considered outside clients. Remember, a stakeholder is any person, organization, or group that is influenced by or may influence the outcome of your deliverable, project deliverable, right? And so your client themselves may place constraints on your project. You'll want to get that from them and document it along the way. And then, of course, at this high level, you'll build the charter. So what we're doing is we're taking the business documents and breaking and narrowing it down into something achievable that still sustains the business document objectives, right? And I talked about that in week 1 when I gave my example of the Golden Gate Bridge, from the business case documents that says, hey, we need a way to move goods back and forth between our communities faster, and we'll both make money and improve efficiency. And then that was the business case. And then the charter came back and said, okay, well, let's do feasibility studies. We saw that it wasn't feasible to build roads and accomplish that business case. It wasn't possible to do air balloons, all right? But then we determined it's feasible to build a bridge. So we then constructed a charter at a high level to define that bridge, the number of lanes, including the pedestrian lane, the lookout spaces, etc. And at a high level then, we would put a budget against that. We have these measurable high level but measurable requirements in the charter, and we've even identified some high level risks and stakeholders. And now we're ready with that high, so the business documents, now down to the charter. Now we're ready to build that detailed project plan that is going to get us where we need to go. And I mean detail, right? So down to the activity. If you are hooking up, if you're building a hairdryer, right? It's going to be how many ohms or amps when you plug it in. Is it going to be European standard or US standard, or what standard, right? Who's in charge? What's the due date? What resources do you need, including plastics, including electricians, so people and things. These all go into what safety requirements, what quality standards are all going to get detailed out. And you are going to have to build a plan for managing the resources assigned to that project along the way based on the activities, right? And so you're going to develop, notice this one, the work breakdown structure. That details your scope, and it gives you a basis for determining the activities in the schedule, and it gives you, in the boxes that make up the work breakdown structure, a way to accumulate the costs, actual costs that you're developing. And this work breakdown structure and tools like it are really key to managing risk, minimizing risk. Remember, we said in week 1 that Waterfall project management, which this largely is risk-centric. It's about reducing risk at every step of the way. So this tool that your team will build, called the work breakdown structure, details your scope, gives you a way to follow through to your schedule activities, and allows you to add up costs and manage risk along the way, especially for gaps. So, a whole brain approach to project planning, right? Project managers are typically left side brained. We're logical, we're analytical. But don't forget to use your right side. How do you get out of a problem? How do you solve a puzzle? Be creative. Allow others to speak. This is where interpersonal skills come in and management skills. Use the whole brain has gotten me out of a lot of issues that only one side or the other of my brain have gotten me into. We'll leave that at that. So we want to do, for example, mind mapping, right? Mind mapping, there's a good picture of it on the next slide. It's a visual approach, so I'll just go there. It's a visual approach to identifying your issues, right? So if you want to get work full-time at an MBA, right, you'd put the issue right here in the center, and you say, well, okay, from the MBA then, what relates to that? Well, I have to consider the technology I'm going to use, and what faculty am I looking for? What would be the content of a coursework? Are there trends in MBA programs around? And then from trends, you brainstorm further issues that you want to deal with. I've built a mind map and then taken this whole thing and turned it into an execution checklist, which was great for my project. Here's another point I want to make. You don't just build a mind map in one sitting. My mind map stayed on the wall back when we used what we used to call butcher board. It would stay on the wall and we would add to it over weeks, right? Is how the mind map developed. Very powerful tool. I already mentioned the work breakdown structure, another super powerful tool, and also a team building tool. It will define the scope. If it's not in the work breakdown structure, it is not in your project. It's what has to be done from start to finish. Scope creep happens when people add things, and I would go back as a project manager. If a stakeholder wants to add something, I would look at the work breakdown structure with them and I'd say, where does it fit in? Because if it's not in the work breakdown structure, it's not in my project. Okay, so the work breakdown structure becomes that key tool. It's also a good team building tool. It also is a great, because a team puts it together and they get to use the left brain, right brain together to solve issues. It also is a great tool as people transition in and out of your project to show them where they're at and how they fit into the whole picture. So many advantages of a work breakdown structure. I also will do, it also contributes to hierarchical planning. So in a work breakdown structure, I'm going to identify the major tasks up top, and then I'm going to continue to break those down into smaller tasks. So for example, if I'm going to build a bicycle, that's my project. I'm going to put the bicycle right at the top, and then down at the next tier, I'm going to, well, I know I need to build a frame, need to build handlebars, and I need to build tires. And then under tires, I'm going to break that down into the next levels. I need to have a front tire, which is very different from a back tire with all the gears and things that go with it. So there's a hierarchy that develops in how I'm going to plan it, all the way down to the activities which form the schedule. Now here's a tool that the book offers in Figure 6-4. It's a way to develop an activity plan, and you could pause, review it. It's self-explanatory, very good. And there are lots of free tools online. I like a place called projectmanagement.com. So you could also perhaps use Career Day in breaking down your work breakdown structure. And you see how it's hierarchical, even though it doesn't look like an org chart. And most work breakdown structures look like an org chart. It's just this is the work broken down. But they can also be in a vertical. So you can see the hierarchical approach. 1A, B, C, there's a hierarchy. 2, A, B, C, D, there's a hierarchy. 3 and 4 follow suit, etc. And it has the same issues. Who's responsible? How long will it take? Etc., etc. What resources will they need? And so the work breakdown structure is a hierarchical tool, regardless of the format it's in, whether it's this format or this format. It's that hierarchical tool. That's a key word if you plan to sit for the credentialed exam, right? And we further break tasks down. So it's easier just to look at one then. So we want to have a conference, and so at that conference I'm going to need a location, facilities, entertainment, session, what sessions do I want, and staffing to support it. Staffing, notice they break it down into home office or local. I could also break that into volunteers, right? We could continue to break down this work breakdown structure. Notice the facilities need to have equipment, food, and a building. We need to accommodate coffee breaks, breakfast, lunches, etc. You see how you're further detailing down. Here is the scope, in essence, at the very top of the work breakdown structure, and you're breaking it down to its lowest level, which is called a work package, the lowest level of a work breakdown structure. So these are some steps you could apply yourself to create. You could take these steps, go back and look at that visual WBS on the last slide and say, okay, can I see how they broke that down for me? Now, with the work breakdown structure is also going to come, so the work breakdown structure looks like an org chart, right? Doesn't have a lot of information. I am going to include with it a document called a work breakdown structure dictionary. In the dictionary are going to be all the details in these little boxes. Who's in charge, when it's due by, what the quality standards are, etc., etc. And so it will even include human resources, right? Which human resources? So I'm going to use my team to build the WBS, especially the little box owners. We'll call them work package owners. And as I break that down, and the WBS, work breakdown structure, ties to an OBS, which is called an organizational breakdown structure. They may not be identical, but they're similar. And that's why I said a WBS looks like an org chart, which would be an organizational breakdown structure. Now, to identify who does what, I'm not only going to put their name in the work breakdown structure dictionary, that's the document that goes with the work breakdown structure, and it has all the details. I'm also going to further define a Racy chart. Now, a Racy chart it's an acronym, Responsible, Accountable, Consultant, Inform, and it helps me identify who is responsible, who is accountable, who do I consult with on each activity, and who do I inform. Remember back to that stakeholder management that we did in Chapter 5, right, with that power and interest grid, right? So who do I inform? So it's going to show critical interfaces and identify who must approve. Notice here's a sample Racy chart. Notice I have my activity down the left side, and I've got my office function who's going to be responsible, be working here. So notice that each row only has one accountable. There can only be one organization accountable at a time for each activity. Notice multiple people can be R's. I could have several R's for each. I could have several informs. I could have several consult. But here's one with 2 informs, but I can only have one accountable for each activity. Now, Agile project management has some considerations here also. So if your scope can't be determined early on, Agile becomes a good way to go, as opposed to this traditional waterfall approach that we've been talking about. In an Agile project, I expect change is constant, right? And it streamlines that change process a little bit. And so it's usually a very small team, 5 or 6 people, tops. It's a collaborative, communicative, sprint-driven approach. Why don't we use it all the time? Because it leads to it's not about controlling risk. It's about managing change. And so when I control risk, I'm looking to reduce my costs. So for certain projects, especially where I can identify in large part the scope up front, Waterfall is the way to go. Let's take a break and we'll come back.